Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Before start, I would like to mention that I really apologize that it took me that long to upload a new mini session, but it's been a very busy days and it was very difficult to prepare something. Anyway, what I propose today is based on an experience that we had in our school for the last days or even a couple of weeks ago. We had the visit of a couple of colleagues that came to look at the way in which we were implementing and delivering our curriculum, and it came across from the visit that maybe we should pay a little bit more attention to the way in which we support our gifted and talented students. So I just thought maybe this is something that we could look into and come up with some ideas on how can we support gifted and talented students in our classrooms. What can we do for these students to be stretched properly? Because when we talk about differentiation, there is a tendency in schools to look at the students with particular learning needs, and those gifted and talented tend to be left on a side, and maybe with just some extra work to be given to them. But before we start, I would like to just have a little discussion. What do we mean by gifted and talented? Some studies think that is a definition that we shouldn't be using anymore, and we're going to try to find out why and what do we think about that. But basically, there's an interesting book or article written by François Gagné, which is just down there, and the author says that a gifted student designates the possession and use of untrained and spontaneously expressed natural abilities. So basically, a gifted student is somebody that has certain abilities in his brain, in her brain, or in his, being creativity, being music, being painting, being academic, being many other things, but it is a possession, and it's used without a particular development, with a particular training. However, a talented student designates the outstanding mastery of systematically developed abilities or skills, which means that you can be born gifted, but you can become talented. Yeah, because talent is something that you master by repeating, by practicing. So basically, these are the kind of things that we have as high flyers. Yeah, the ones who are gifted or the ones who are talented. Now, I don't know if you agree with this definition. I don't know if you agree with this terminology, but these authors, Gross and Geek, mention that the term gifted and talented has a connotation of intellectual superiority, and that maybe we shouldn't be using this term and maybe another one. I kind of agree with the fact that from my perspective, all students are talented. All students are gifted in a particular area, in a particular aspect, or at least this is what we should recognize: the talent and the way in which each one of us are gifted or talented in something. In any case, if we leave aside this discussion, and then I will be delighted to see what do you think about that. If you can write it on the chat on this video channel, it'll be amazing to see how do you call these high flyers in your school. Do you have a gifted and talented policy? Do you call it differently? What do you understand by a gifted and talented student? Anyway, let's move on. So what can we do? What can we do to support those students in our classrooms? So I'm going to share with you a couple of strategies, and see if it's something that you already do, or something that you are considering in putting in place, or something that you've never thought of. Okay, the first one is to use the Bloom's taxonomy. So if you look at the Bloom's taxonomy, as you well know, they have a higher level thinking skills and lower level thinking skills. And of course, something that we can do is having the same type of activity in our classroom, just to present the question in a different way. So when we use what we call the command terms, those terms that lead the question, for these gifted and talented students, we could start questions by the two upper levels of the taxonomy, ask them to create something, ask them to evaluate something, while with the rest of the class, we could be using analyze, apply, understand, or remember. So basically, if we use this strategy, we're not only addressing the challenges needed for the gifted and talented, but also for the other ones who are on the lower academic performance, if you want. So this is something very interesting because it only expects us to change the way in which the question is presented, the way in which the assessment task is created, isn't it? So it's just the way we use this command term that leads to a more challenging demand or to a less challenging one. A second activity or a second strategy could be using mentor work. Mentor work means trying to get to know or gifted and talented students. What are their interests? What are the skills that they need to develop to be successful in those interests? And find an adult in the school, parents included. So look at the school community and see to what extent any adult is willing to work with that student to explore certain areas of interest that the student has apart from the classroom. So that can be another nice strategy to be used. If we look at more strategies, another that I find very interesting, but I'm very much on top of the quality of the questions that we ask in class, is use what we call the provoking questions, the powerful questions, those questions that develop inquiry in the lesson. So by asking open-ended questions, we can develop certain skills, the curiosity and the capacity of those high flyers to think further, to reflect further. Because basically, the student's learning loops through a cycle of wonder, exploration, discovery, reflection, and more wonder. So if we look at this aha moment, this can be done through a good process of questioning. So basically, avoid bias in the questions, make the questions engaging, watch for closed-ended questions, and try to make them in a way, avoid the closed-ended questions, and look for more open-ended questions, questions that allow for reflection, opinion, arguments, development of ideas, and so on. So it's important that the way in which we use questions help those students to develop their thinking further. We can also look at summative tasks which are project-based, contextualized, that have links with real life, that students can understand that by developing certain skills and understanding and knowledge through a particular project, they can apply what they've learned in their real life. Have a hands-on activities, experimental learning, project-based activities. Yeah, so I think this is also a very interesting way to approach those students that need to be further challenged. More strategies. What about empowering them? What about developing student agency? But what about engaging those students in the decision making? Give them the opportunity to discover what does it mean to take responsibility of their own learning. When we plan a lesson, when we plan a unit, an activity, can we count on them? Can we ask them what do they think? How we should approach that particular concept, that particular question in a way that they feel challenged? This is also extremely important. Accelerating the curriculum, which is a nice word, but how do we do that? Maybe by teaching research skills if we want them to access some information. By developing high-level thinking skills when we want them to process the information. By developing creative thinking and problem solving when we want to ask them to look at approaching information or generating information. And finally, developing communication skills when we ask them to share that information. So this is a way to accelerate the curriculum because we're going through all the processes of looking for the information, selecting and processing that information, trying to use that information to solve certain problems, and finally, communicate, share the way in which they have solved that problem with the rest of the class. It's a skill-based delivery, basically. More things, having open forums, debates, share our personal interests with the students so they can feel enriched and expand their world. Try to look at different points of view. Create debates around these open-ended questions when we ask them to bring their opinion, when we ask them to justify their opinion, when we ask them to produce something with their opinion. Of course, encourage them to participate in extracurricular activities that may or may not involve academic skills depending on the talent or the gift that the student has. Of course, if the student is talented more into the creative arts, music, the performing arts, visual arts, the design, the sports, that we're going to invite them to participate on those ECA. If it's more an academic development, then model United Nations to develop communication skills. Debate clubs, be part of the student council so they can represent the students and develop those leadership skills as well. This is also extremely important. And things that we should avoid, things that we should not do. The first one is something that many of us do, which is assign extra work. So if they finish early, give them an extra task. We never imagine how unfair this is for them, because basically we're punishing them for being gifted by giving them extra work. So what about once they finish this work early? Allow them to work in independent projects or unfinished work from other subjects, or make sure that the assignment we give them is challenging enough that it will take them as long as it takes the other ones to finish their own work. So try to avoid giving extra work. Remember that those gifted and talented may not excel in all areas. So don't expect them to be brilliant at everything, and encourage them to try to look for the challenges in all these other aspects that they're not particularly talented in, and make them realize that there will always be room for improvement in certain other academic or non-academic aspects of their life. Of course, try to avoid placing unrealistic expectations and putting too much pressure on those students. They are children, and we need to remember their age, their reality, their social skills, their social emotional well-being. So don't expect too much from them just because they are gifted and talented. In any case, I wanted to share those strategies with you, and I will be delighted if you can find the time to just reply in the chat saying if there's any other strategy that works for you, so we can still this idea and we can all become better teachers. Above all, establish and maintain a warm, accepting classroom. Teach your students to embrace diversity and honor differences. Provide an environment which is challenging to everybody and where everybody can demonstrate his or her potential. And what I would like you to think is that these strategies that I've been sharing with you, do you think they're beneficial for all the students? Maybe we should look at the idea of universal design, and whatever works for the gifted and talented should, in theory, work for everybody else. So I let you reflect on this last aspect, hoping to see you soon back in this YouTube channel. Thank you very much.